Look, I am not proud of what happened. My name is Vorik, and I serve as the third diplomatic consul for the Galactic Assembly, which, if you are wondering, is basically a fancy title for the guy who has to clean up everyone else's mess. And let me tell you, this particular mess. This was the mess to end all messes. It started 6 cycles ago, when humanity decided to knock on our door. Well, actually, they did not knock. They kind of just showed up in the middle of Assembly Hall with a ship that should not have been able to bypass our security grid, smiled real wide, and said they wanted to join the club. The council laughed. I mean, really laughed. High Magistrate Kelver actually snorted his drinking fluid through his nasal cavity, which, for his species, is both disgusting and hilarious. These humans, with their fragile bodies and their ridiculous obsession with something called coffee, thought they belonged among the elder races. The civilizations that had mastered stellar travel when Earth was still figuring out fire. Absolutely precious. Commander Thane, the human representative, just stood there with this weird smile on his face. Not angry. Not embarrassed. Just amused. That should have been our first warning sign. When someone does not react to mockery with either rage or shame, you need to pay attention. But did we? Of course not. We are the Galactic Assembly, the pinnacle of civilization, the arbiters of 1,000 worlds. Why would we worry about one little planet of bipedal primates? The Assembly, in its infinite wisdom, decided to issue humanity what we call a standard challenge. It is basically an entrance exam. Complete 3 impossible tasks, and you get a seat at the big table. Fail, and you go home with your tail between your legs. Or whatever appendage your species uses for shame displays. Task 1 was the navigation trial through the Scorvath Nebula. The nebula is a death trap, a swirling maze of plasma storms and gravitational anomalies that has claimed 647 ships in recorded history. The best pilots in the galaxy take 48 hours to navigate it, assuming they survive. We gave humanity 72 hours, which we thought was generous. Honestly, we expected them to decline right there. Thane nodded once. When do we start? 2 days later, a human pilot named Riko Tanaka showed up in a ship that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts and optimism. The vessel had actual duct tape visible on the exterior plating. Duct tape. In space. The betting pools gave her a 3% chance of survival. She cleared the nebula in 11 hours. 11 hours. When the monitoring station asked her how she did it, she said, and I quote, "I played a lot of video games as a kid." This was basically the same thing, but with better graphics. The council chamber went very quiet. Kelver's face did this thing where all his skin flaps inverted, which means he was either impressed or having a stroke. Possibly both. But fine. Fine. Maybe she got lucky. Maybe the nebula was having an off day. The second task would sort things out. Task 2 was the diplomatic summit with the Vrex Collective. Now, the Vrex are. How do I put this delicately? They are telepathic predators who consider every conversation a psychological duel to the death. Their language operates on 7 levels of meaning simultaneously, and they eat negotiators who bore them. Literally eat them. We have lost 4 ambassadors to the Vrex, and those were trained professionals with decades of experience. We sent in humanity's diplomat, a woman named Maria Santos. She was short, round, and had this grandmotherly energy that made you want to hug her and ask for cookies. The Vrex took one look at her and started sharpening their mandibles. 3 hours later, Maria walked out, completely unharmed, with a trade agreement that gave humanity access to Vrex technology. The Vrex Queen was smiling. Smiling. When we asked Maria how she pulled it off, she shrugged and said, "I have 5 kids and 12 grandchildren. Compared to Thanksgiving dinner with my family, this was relaxing." The Vrex Queen apparently told her she was the most terrifying being she had ever encountered, and she meant it as a compliment. At this point, members of the assembly were getting nervous. 2 tasks down, 1 to go. But the third task? The third task was supposed to be impossible, even for us. We called it the Crucible. The Crucible is a combat scenario. Not a fair fight, mind you. Fair fights are for species with honor. This was a slaughter, designed to teach overconfident newcomers their place. The challenge was simple. Survive for 1 hour against our automated defense system in a sealed arena. The system adapts, learns, and escalates. Nothing survives the full hour. The best anyone has ever done was 43 minutes, and that warrior was a Kralix berserker who could bench press a small moon. Humanity sent in a team of 5 soldiers. Not their best. Not their elite special forces. Just 5 regular military personnel. When I saw them, I actually felt bad. They looked so normal. So breakable. The team leader was a guy named Jackson Torres. Average height, average build, with these calm eyes that had seen things. Bad things. He nodded at me as his team entered the arena, and I remember thinking this was such a waste. They seemed like decent people. The Crucible activated. For the first 5 minutes, everything went according to plan. The defense drones engaged, the soldiers scattered for cover, weapons fire lit up the arena. Standard combat procedure. The assembly members settled in to watch, making notes about human tactical doctrine for future reference. Then something changed. The humans stopped reacting. They started predicting. They moved like they could see 3 steps ahead, coordinating without verbal communication, setting up crossfires and ambush points with this eerie precision. When the Crucible adapted, deploying heavier units, the humans adapted faster. At the 15-minute mark, Torres did something that made my blood crystallize. He deliberately injured himself, creating a blood trail. The defense system, programmed to target wounded prey, redirected 3 hunter units to his position. He led them into a kill zone where his team had jury-rigged explosives from disabled drones. They were not trying to survive the Crucible. They were hunting it. 20 minutes in, they had taken control of half the arena. 30 minutes, they had hacked into the system's peripheral units and were using them against the core defenses. At 45 minutes, Torres walked up to the primary control node, ripped out its processing core with his bare hands, and spoke directly into the monitoring system. You know what your problem is? You fight to kill. We fight to win. There is a difference. They shut down the Crucible at 52 minutes. Not because time ran out. Because there was nothing left to fight. The assembly chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates were screaming at each other in 17 different languages. Kelver looked like he wanted to void his digestive system right there on the floor. This was not supposed to happen. This could not happen. But it did. High Magistrate Kelver called for an emergency session. He declared that humanity had technically passed all 3 challenges but that we needed time to review the results, verify the data, all the usual bureaucratic stalling tactics. Thane, who had been sitting quietly in the observation gallery, stood up. With respect, High Magistrate, we both know what this is really about. You are scared. The chamber went silent. You do not call the High Magistrate scared. You just do not. Kelver's voice dropped to a dangerous register. Choose your next words carefully, human. Thane smiled that same weird smile from before. You asked us to prove ourselves. We did. Now you are moving the goalposts because you do not like the answer. That is fine. We are patient. But know this. Earth is not going away. We are here. We are staying. And eventually, you are going to have to decide whether you want us as friends, competitors, or something else entirely. Is that a threat? One of the delegates shrieked. No, Thane replied calmly. It is a fact. Humans do not threaten. We do not need to. We just outlast everyone else. It is kind of our thing. That night, I could not stop thinking about his words. I pulled up humanity's file, the one we had compiled when they first made contact. The more I read, the more concerned I became. Humans were the only species in the known galaxy to evolve from pursuit predators. Every other sentient race came from either ambush hunters or prey animals. Humans. They chased their food until it died of exhaustion. They did not need to be faster or stronger. They just needed to be more stubborn. They had survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and extinction events that would have wiped out any other species. They had split the atom before they had achieved global peace. They had walked on their moon before they had cured their common diseases. They did things backwards, inefficiently, chaotically. But they did them. And now they were here, knocking on our door, passing our impossible tests, and smiling like they knew something we did not. I sent a message to Kelver that night. Just 3 words. We made a mistake. His response came back immediately. I know. The next morning, the assembly convened for what we thought would be a routine session to discuss trade routes. Thane was there, sitting in the guest section, looking bored. Then Kelver stood up and made an announcement that changed everything. The Galactic Assembly has received a formal complaint from the Zothrak Empire. They claim that human vessels have been operating in contested space, violating the Treaty of Carvos, and demands that we censure humanity immediately or face economic sanctions. I felt my stomach drop. The Zothrak Empire was trouble. They were a militant expansionist power that the Assembly had been trying to keep at bay for decades through a complex web of treaties and compromises. If they were making moves now, it meant they saw humanity as a threat, or worse, as an opportunity. Thane stood up slowly. We have been exploring unclaimed regions as outlined in Article 7 of the Contact Protocols. If the Zothrak have an issue with that, they can take it up with our exploration teams directly. Your exploration teams are military vessels, the Zothrak ambassador hissed. She was a tall, reptilian creature named Saskra, with eyes like targeting lasers. You are surveying our borders. You are preparing for conflict. We are preparing for possibilities, Thane corrected. There is a difference. One you would understand if your empire did not measure success by how many neighbors you have conquered. The chamber exploded in outrage. You do not insult a member species like that, especially not the Zothrak. Saskra rose to her full height, her scales rippling with barely contained fury. You dare. You insignificant, primitive, barely civilized apes dare to speak to me with such disrespect. Thane did not flinch. I dare because we completed your ridiculous challenges, because we have earned our place here, and because unlike some species, we do not hide our strength behind diplomatic doublespeak. You want to test humanity? Come test us. But remember something, Ambassador. We do not start fights. We end them. Kelver tried to restore order, but it was too late. The gauntlet had been thrown. The Zothrak would not let this insult stand, and humanity had just painted a target on their backs. As the session dissolved into chaos and the delegates fled to send emergency transmissions to their homeworlds, I sat there wondering how everything had gone so wrong so fast. That was 6 cycles ago. What happened next? Well, that is where things get really interesting. And by interesting, I mean absolutely catastrophic in ways that still give me nightmares. But that story will have to wait for another time. Because right now, I need to finish my report on why the Galactic Assembly is currently meeting in a bunker 300 levels underground while human ships patrol our space and the Zothrak Empire is suspiciously quiet. The title of my report? The Galaxy Regretted Challenging Humans, a retrospective analysis of the biggest diplomatic disaster in recorded history. Yeah. That about sums it up. So where was I? Right. The part where everything went sideways, caught fire, and then exploded spectacularly. After Thane's little speech, the Zothrak Empire did exactly what everyone expected them to do. They mobilized their fleet. 300 warships, all heading straight for human-controlled space. The assembly called for an emergency mediation session, which was basically our way of saying please do not fight in our nice clean galaxy, we just had it detailed. Saskra, the Zothrak ambassador, stood before the council with this smug expression that made me want to throw my data pad at her face. Professional diplomacy is exhausting sometimes. Humanity has 48 hours to withdraw from all contested regions and issue a formal apology to the Zothrak Empire. Failure to comply will result in military action. We will not tolerate this disrespect from a species barely out of their own solar system. Thane, who was leaning against the back wall like he was waiting for a bus, raised his hand. Quick question. When you say military action, do you mean actual military action, or the kind where you threaten a bunch, fire a few warning shots, and then go home when things get complicated? Because we have been studying your tactics, and you guys talk a big game, but your actual combat record is like 20 wins and 34 losses. Not great, honestly. The chamber went dead silent. You could hear the atmospheric recyclers humming. Saskra's scales turned a deep purple, which in Zothrak body language means either extreme rage or severe indigestion. Possibly both. You mock the Zothrak Empire? We who have conquered 47 star systems. We who have crushed every opponent who dared challenge us. Yeah, about that, Thane said, pulling up a holographic display. We did the math. Those 47 systems. 31 of them were uninhabited. 10 were pre-industrial civilizations that could not fight back. And the remaining 6 surrendered without firing a shot because you threatened to bombard their agricultural centers. So really, you have not actually beaten anyone who could punch back. Which makes this whole tough guy routine kind of adorable. I wanted to crawl under my desk and die. You do not just call a galactic empire adorable. That is not how diplomacy works. Saskra practically vibrated with fury. 48 hours, human. Withdraw, or face annihilation. Thane shrugged. See you in 48 hours then. Should be fun. Fun. He called an interstellar war fun. I submitted my resignation that afternoon. Kelva rejected it. Said I had to stay and document the apocalypse. Thanks, boss. The next 2 days were a frenzy of activity. Every species in the assembly was choosing sides, forming alliances, or very conspicuously pretending to have urgent business in other galaxies. The smart money was on the Zothrak. They had numbers, experience, and a track record of conquest. Humanity had what? Clever tricks and an unsettling amount of confidence. I spent those 48 hours trying to establish back channels with both sides, hoping to broker some kind of last-minute peace deal. The Zothrak refused to even respond to my messages. Thane sent back a recipe for something called chili dogs with a note that said, "You should try these, they are great. Also, do not worry so much. We got this. We got this." The man was about to face a fleet 300 strong, and he was recommending lunch options. When the 48 hours expired, the Zothrak fleet arrived at the edge of human territory. Specifically, they arrived at a mining colony called New Perth, which had a population of about 2,000 people and minimal defenses. It was the perfect target for a demonstration of force. The Zothrak could crush it, make their point, and force humanity to the negotiating table. At least, that was the plan. The Zothrak fleet commander, a veteran named Korath, sent out a system-wide broadcast demanding immediate surrender. He gave them 10 minutes to comply. Standard intimidation tactics. The response from New Perth came back in under 30 seconds. It was a single sentence. Come and take it. Korath, to his credit, did not hesitate. He ordered the fleet to advance and prepare for orbital bombardment. 300 ships moving in perfect formation, weapons charging, a display of overwhelming force designed to break enemy morale before the first shot was fired. That was when the humans activated the minefield. Nobody knew humanity had been seeding space mines throughout their territory. Thousands of them. Clever little devices that stayed dormant until activated, completely invisible to standard sensors. The Zothrak fleet ran straight into them at full speed. 47 ships gone in the first 30 seconds. Just gone. Explosions lit up the void like fireworks. Korath screamed orders to halt and regroup, but the humans were not done. Every asteroid in the belt suddenly came alive with weapons platforms. Hidden installations that had been disguised as mining equipment opened fire with rail guns, missiles, and energy weapons that should not have been possible given humanity's technology level. Where did they get this stuff? How long had they been preparing? The Zothrak fleet tried to return fire, but they were fighting blind. Human ships, small fast vessels that registered on sensors like debris, swarmed through the chaos. They were not trying to win through firepower. They were dismantling the Zothrak formation, cutting off communication relays, targeting command ships, and generally making Koratha's life a living nightmare. And then, because humans apparently believe in overkill as a core philosophical principle, they did something that still makes me question reality. They rammed the flagship. A human captain named Lisa Kowalski took her damaged frigate, aimed it directly at Koratha's command vessel, and punched her ship through 6 decks of Zothrak armor plating at near relativistic speed. The flagship did not explode. It just sort of folded in half and died. Kowalski survived somehow. The crazy woman ejected in an escape pod seconds before impact, got picked up by a human rescue team, and was back on duty 3 hours later. The Zothrak fleet, or what was left of it, retreated. 212 ships reduced to 73 operational vessels in under 2 hours. It was not a battle. It was a massacre. The assembly watched the whole thing through monitoring stations. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. We just sat there, staring at the tactical displays, trying to process what we had witnessed. Kelver finally broke the silence. "Get Thane on the comm now." When Thane's face appeared on the view screen, he was eating something that looked disturbingly like fried insect parts. Potato chips, apparently. A human delicacy. "High Magistrate. What can I do for you?" Kelver's voice was very carefully controlled. "What was that?" "That? Oh, you mean the battle. Yeah, the Zothrak are not as tough as they think. Turns out when you spend centuries beating up people who cannot fight back, you get sloppy. Who knew? You destroyed 2/3 of their fleet. Technically, we destroyed 139 ships. The other casualties were from secondary explosions, collisions, and one really unfortunate navigation error that sent a Zothrak destroyer into their own minefield. That one was just funny. This is not a joke, Commander Thane. You have escalated a diplomatic incident into a full-scale war. Thane stopped smiling. No, High Magistrate. The Zothrak escalated this when they threatened to bombard a civilian mining colony because their ambassador got her feelings hurt. We just finished it. There is a difference. The Zothrak will retaliate. They have allies. This conflict will spread. Let it spread, Thane said quietly. We are ready. The question is, are you? The transmission ended. Kelver looked like he had aged 20 cycles in 2 hours. Over the next few days, something remarkable happened. The Zothrak Empire, facing the prospect of continued losses against an enemy they had completely underestimated, did the unthinkable. They sued for peace. Not just peace. They offered reparations, trade concessions, and a formal apology for violating human territorial rights. The mighty Zothrak Empire, terror of the Outer Rim, conqueror of 47 systems, brought to heel by a species that had not even mastered faster than light travel a century ago. The galactic community went into shock. Every government, every empire, every petty kingdom suddenly had to recalculate their entire strategic planning. Humanity was not just a newcomer anymore. They were a legitimate power. Maybe the most dangerous kind of power, because nobody understood their limits. The Assembly convened an emergency summit to address the new reality. Delegates from 200 worlds packed the chamber, all of them wanting answers. How powerful were the humans really? What were their intentions? Could they be trusted? Should they be feared? Kelver opened the session with a simple statement. Humanity has demonstrated their capability to defend themselves and their allies. The Assembly must now decide how to proceed. Do we embrace them as full members, or do we continue to treat them as outsiders? The debate lasted for 6 hours. Some delegates argued for inclusion, pointing out that humanity had only acted in self-defense. Others demanded restrictions, claiming humans were too aggressive, too unpredictable. A few, the really paranoid ones, suggested preemptive containment before humanity became an existential threat. That last suggestion made me laugh. Containment. Like you could put humans in a box and expect them to stay there. Finally, Thane was invited to address the Assembly. He walked to the central platform, looked around at the hundreds of faces staring at him, and spoke. I know you are scared. I know what you saw disturbs you. A primitive species that barely qualifies as spacefaring just dismantled one of your established powers. That has to be terrifying from your perspective. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. But here is the thing you need to understand about humans. We do not want to conquer you. We do not want to dominate the galaxy. We just want to exist, explore, learn, and be left alone to do our thing. But if you threaten us, if you try to bully us, or push us around, or treat us like we are less than you, we will respond. And we will respond with everything we have. That sounds like a threat, someone called out. No, Thane replied. It is a promise. Humans have spent our entire history fighting. Fighting nature. Fighting each other. Fighting extinction. We are really good at it because we have had to be. But we also know how to build, create, cooperate, and thrive. We can be your greatest allies or your worst nightmare. The choice is yours. Kelver leaned forward. And if the Assembly grants you full membership? What then? Then we become partners. We share our knowledge. We contribute to the common good. We help defend against threats that endanger everyone. And maybe, just maybe, we teach you something about survival that your ancient civilizations have forgotten. Which is? Thane smiled. That being the biggest, oldest, or most advanced does not mean you are the toughest. Toughness comes from getting knocked down and getting back up. Every single time. No matter what. Humanity has been knocked down more times than we can count. We are still here. Still standing. Still moving forward. That is what makes us dangerous. Not our weapons. Not our tactics. Our refusal to quit. The vote was held that evening. 473 delegates in favor. 62 against. 18 abstentions. Humanity was granted full membership in the Galactic Assembly. Thane shook Kelver's hand, thanked the Assembly, and left to catch a transport back to Earth. Just like that. No grand celebration. No victory speech. He had made his point. Time to go home. I caught up with him in the docking bay before his ship departed. Commander Thane, can I ask you something? Sure, Vorik. What is on your mind? Was any of this part of a plan? The challenges, the Zothrak, all of it? Or did you just make it up as you went along? Thane laughed. Little bit of both, honestly. We knew the galaxy would test us. We prepared as best we could. But the specifics? Yeah, we improvised. Humans are really good at improvisation. It is kind of our superpower. You scared us, you know. You still scare us. Good, Thane said, but not unkindly. Fear breeds respect. Respect breeds caution. Caution prevents stupid wars that get people killed. If being scary keeps everyone alive and talking instead of shooting, then I will take it. His ship departed 10 minutes later. I stood in the docking bay, watching the drive flames fade into the distance, and thought about everything that had happened. 6 cycles ago, humanity knocked on our door asking to join the galactic community. We laughed at them, tested them, and expected them to fail. Instead, they passed every challenge, beat back an empire, and forced us to accept them as equals. The galaxy regretted challenging humans. Because we learned something that day, something that every species in the assembly now understands on a fundamental level. Humans do not ask for permission. They do not wait for approval. They just show up, do the impossible, and dare you to tell them otherwise. And if you are smart, really smart, you step aside and let them do their thing. Because the alternative is finding out exactly how far humanity is willing to go to prove a point. Trust me. You do not want to find out. I filed my final report that night. Kelver read it, stamped it approved, and locked it in the classified archives. Too dangerous for public consumption, he said. Would cause panic. The title still makes me smile though. The galaxy regretted challenging humans, a retrospective analysis of the biggest diplomatic disaster in recorded history, and why we should probably just let them do whatever they want. Yeah. That about covers it.